Welcome to our world, YouTubers from all over. The Tech Town Square is back. I am your host, James Azar. Joining me is my co-host and one of the greatest people I know, Eddie Doyle. Eddie, what is happening, my man?
Hello, everybody. Well, it's December 2nd today. 2020, I usually I complain a bit when people put up their Christmas decorations right after Thanksgiving Day, or even in the first week of December. I'm kind of second, third week, and let's just really enjoy it. But
Why?
you know what, this year,
Why? As a
why?
Jew, like I love Christmas decoration. The earlier is the earlier the better.
Oh, I love it. It's just that if it's so early, by the time Christmas rolls around, it's kind of normal. All the lights are normal, the tree's normal. It's like, it's not special anymore for me. So I like to be teased. It's kind of like a filet mignon is a nice, delicate, beautiful, small piece of steak. If you gave me a 72-ounce filet, I'm going to feel gross if I eat that damn thing. So that's why.
If anyone gives you a 72-ounce fillet, you'd feel gross eating it. I think getting a 72-ounce porterhouse though is a whole other thing. And by the way, I don't think you can get a fillet that's 72 ounces.
No, I don't think you can. I don't think it. The analogy ran away on me right there, James.
It did. You should have gone with if you get a 96-ounce porterhouse, right? Like you'd feel really bad about eating it.
Well, I tell you, so I lived in Denver in the mid-90s, and there was a steakhouse, where if you went in with a tie on, they'll take a pair of shears and cut it off. It's a cowboy steakhouse,
It used to be over in what's it called? In the Westminster. It was right next to the Westminster Mall.
I think so. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was right next to the Westminster Mall.
You know this place.
I remember this place, man. I remember I took people there. It shut down like a decade ago. It shut down a while ago, man.
So the trick was, this was back in my pauper days, right? I was newly married. I'm like 24 years old. I had $2 in my jeans, right? So you put an old crap tie on. You go down to the thrift store. You get a tie. You go in there, and when they cut it off, you get a free drink. So this is what we used to do. Anyway, the point is, there was a 72-ounce steak on the menu, and if you could eat it, including the gristle, you got it for free. If you couldn't eat it, I forget what the price point is, like $400.
You know,
30 years ago.
I used to love food challenges. Like on Facebook, I used to watch all these like professional food challenge eaters. You know, the guy that would travel the world and go and get like the ultimate hamburger challenge, 15 patties with cheese and bacon and fries. And if you eat it all within an hour, you get it for free and you get a t-shirt. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, that can't be healthy.
No.
That just can't be healthy at all.
But back in the days of my mid-20s, when I had a hell of an appetite, I was kind of eyeing that item, but there's no way I could have afforded it if I couldn't have finished it. That was my point on the size of that steak with that restaurant. Too funny that you know that joint. But anyway, yes.
Well, I'm from Colorado. You got to remember, like Colorado is like our it's my hometown, man. It's where I live. It's
right.
Colorado's my place. I love Colorado. I miss Colorado.
4 great seasons in Colorado, right? Beautiful summer, great fall, nice winter, beautiful spring.
I gotta tell you though, the seasons in Colorado do not go according to seasons. Like I think most people that live in Colorado know this. Like, you're not really technically supposed to get snow until Thanksgiving. Really, realistically. We used to get snow on Halloween. And then in April and May, people would be like, April showers bring May flowers. We're like, April snow bring May's blizzard.
Yeah, right.
Like you'd randomly get a blizzard in May. Like Memorial Weekend would, I remember one year snow on Memorial Weekend.
And at the tail end of winter, you just don't want it in April either. This is my point about eating too much steak, having too much snow, and having too much Christmas. But this year, given that it's 2020, to hell with it. Let's get those damn Christmas decorations up. Let's go nuts. Let's have a party because it's just been a crazy year. So that's the frame of mind I'm at right now, my friend.
Brilliant. So we're live on YouTube for those tuning in on YouTube. For those watching, you can always comment below later on, and we will get back to these. This show is live on YouTube every Wednesday at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. For those that want to tune in, we're just getting started, guys. So if you're watching and you're the first time, and we're getting a few tens of views or whatnot. Thank you for watching us. Thank you for putting up with us. Join the discussion. The idea is not just for me and Eddie to banter. Put some time aside middle of the week. 6 p.m. Eastern time. Set an hour aside, join us, have a conversation, let us know what's on your heart. We call on people here. We want to hear what you have to say. This is the Tech Town Square. This is a safe place for you to be, for you to speak your mind, speak your beliefs. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Back the Blue, the whole defund the police movement that has somehow awoken in this country. Started with the murder of George Floyd and has gone on since, but it's worthy of a discussion. It's worthy to look at it from a Tech Town Square perspective, of having the conversation of what we need to do with our police, and how technology and all of that can play a role in what police officers do in the future.
Right. And it's so let's get right into the fact, defund the police. What does that actually mean? It means a lot of things to different people, as a matter of fact. So that's kind of interesting. And because it means a lot of things to a lot of people, there's ambiguity around it.
There's no ambiguity around it. I'm sorry. Let me stop you right there, sir.
Go on.
There's been elected members. The city of Minnesota, I think the city council defunded and wanted to dismember the police department, meaning they physically stopped giving it money and said, we're going to move to community policing, only to reverse themselves a few weeks later because they realized this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right?
And
so,
but yet to other people,
defunding the police is not defunding the police means exactly what it means, Eddie. I'm not going to sugarcoat this pretty. We don't want police anymore. We want to defund the police. We want to invest the police money in other programs. And we know that if we do that, then crime won't be there anymore. That's the utopic world of pot smokers in this country.
But you see, it's so ludicrous. I can't honestly believe that that's what even the majority of people would want. Right?
No one wants this.
It's so stupid.
No
right?
one wants this.
So yet why is it why is it such a catchphrase that's going viral? So that's what I mean about ambiguity, because I think people who are unaware are liking and forwarding and tweeting and amplifying the message on social media. But do they realize that it means there'll be no police if you call 911? Because that's the original thought from this thing. I don't think those people want that. What you just described, which is 100% accurate, by the way, is so ludicrous. It's so stupid. It's beyond infantile thinking. And so that's why I mean ambiguity. So then if you talk to, let's say, a reasonable person who is, let's say, on the side of the corporation of Black Lives Matter and the people, I think Black Lives Matter are the ones that originated this. That's why I bring that up. I think they were. I don't think that they would agree that defunding and disbanding the police is the right thing to do. So then the politicians start working around this, and they'll say things like, well, we don't actually mean completely disband, not the ones that you just referred to. What we mean is, okay, let's do police reform. Well, then you shouldn't call it defund the police. You should call it police reform. And even police reform is kind of an interesting tactic. Look, here's what I think right out the gate. I think that in the last 25 years, this is the Tech Town Square of the internet and technology and the massive upheaval, the big, 2.0 version of the Renaissance that we're going through has been so rapid that police services have had to completely retool themselves so that they are a digitally apt workforce. I mean, the cell phone can be weaponized and should be used as a weapon in the sense that it can be used for triangulating criminals. It can be used, let's say, if a police officer is pinned down under fire and there are CCTV cameras in a large city like New York City, near where I live, they can actually tap in to that CCTV camera, looking at their phone and see where the bad guys are. That's what I mean by weaponizing technology. And so this actually requires more training, more funding. So the defund police, I'm completely against as a slogan. I'm obviously against what you talked about with Minnesota. I think the majority of people are, except some insane politicians. But we should be funding more.
It's not insane politicians, Eddie. It's the Democratic Party whether people like it or not. On Twitter, I searched the defund the police hashtag on Twitter. This is all from today. This is a tweet from Representative Jim Jordan, who said earlier this year, the Democrats passed legislation that would pay states to let criminals out of prison. That's before they even came up with the idea of hashtag defund the police. This is a hashtag Bojana Novakovic, who was born in Yugoslavia, raised in Australia, and living in New York. She wrote this: "How is it that people, neoliberal leftists included, are not willing to understand that defund the police doesn't mean end public safety? It means that in 100 years, humans can look back at this moment and proudly say we ended the illusion that armed forces are community care." And we can keep going here. A bunch of stuff around defund the police. There's a video on here posted from 4 hours ago about someone, some Black Lives Matter protest around the idea of defunding the police. Obama today made headlines, obviously, because saying that if you have to explain your slogan you're already using, it doesn't mean to stop all police funding, just reallocate portion of it to alternative preventative measures.
And he got slammed by the progressives for that, by the way.
Yeah.
He got slammed by the progressives. Isn't that fun?
Listen, Obama is by far one of the worst presidents this country's ever had. History is going to look upon him honestly in 20 years when someone can honestly judge his presidency and say that was probably the worst presidency maybe since Jimmy Carter. How he got 2 terms is still mind-boggling for me. But he was probably one of the worst.
We can discuss how we got 2 terms on, I think, another podcast. It would actually be a very interesting subject matter. But I want to talk a little bit about personality and psychology, because there are millions of people that are going, defund the police. So yes, we've got these, let's call them extremists. I mean, that's nuts. The person you just read that was from all over the world, that's over here, that's saying, 100 years from now, we'll look back and defunding armed people. It's like, really? You need to talk about de-arming criminals before you can defund the bad guys. I mean, that's a Neville Chamberlain.
Yeah, but you can't do that, right? I mean, this idea of defunding criminals.
But that's right.
Sorry, let's go back to the Constitution, right? Any place where they said, let's disarm the bad guys, all the good guys, bring back your guns so we can take the guns from the bad guys, and that way trust us to make you safe. That's a BS socialist communistic plan to really take over the population and disarm the population. I'll never put down my guns. There's nothing the government can tell me to put down my guns.
For sure, I have nothing wrong with the Second Amendment, my friend. What I mean by disarming criminals is, unless you can guarantee that criminals will not pick up guns, which you can never do, right? So this is the Neville Chamberlain moment I want to talk about. Then why are you talking about disarming the good guys, the cops in this case? Right, going straight to looking back and forget what that sentence was. I mean, it sounds so utopian, where we'll look back in 100 years from now and we will. What was that sentence, James? That was really, if you still got it up, we'll look back in 100 years from now and we'll see that we disarmed something. It was, but basically the security services.
Right.
It's ludicrous. So think about this. The Neville Chamberlain moment, by the way, I'm referring to, for those people, I hope you would know this, is Neville Chamberlain comes back from meeting with Hitler. It's all very well in hindsight, right? I mean, Neville Chamberlain gets a bad rap, and for good enough reason, but he gets a really bad rap. In hindsight, it's clear. But there are the Winston Churchills who did see this beforehand, right? And so he comes back. He's got a piece of paper, peace in our time, and he shows the piece of paper. He gets off the boat. He's, peace in our time. I've made a deal with the devil. I mean, with Adolf Hitler. And so he makes this deal, and of course the rest is history, as we know. That's what that tweet or that quote sounded like to me. Okay, but there is an interesting psychology behind this, I think, and why it is left-leaning people typically lean in the direction of defund the police. There is a certain beauty, I think, in all humanity, which is that, and in you and I as well as right-wingers, which is that we don't want war. we want peace, right? This is a good thing. We, of course, we don't want people like George Floyd, who, should have been in court to be convicted of his crime, not by a police officer in the street, right? Shouldn't be punished in that way. This is what we adhere to. And people who are left leaning tend to have a more open and a more creative personality and skill set and mindset. They don't like borders, right? They like to think outside of the box. This is a trait thing. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's not good or bad that right-wing people have more kind of like, okay, we like structure and order, building, enterprise, these kinds of things. It's not about ethics. It's purely about the way people lean, right, in their understanding of what could be a peaceful utopian society. We want this. This is why socialism is appealing to people who are leaning in this direction. Because it's like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we were all kind of like the same? Well, that does sound nice, doesn't it? The problem is no one's come up with a plan in order to institute this. Right? The closest thing we've got is actually capitalism, because capitalism is a fair trade between parties. Right? There was a great quote where capitalism is even more democratic than democracies. Now I'm going to support that statement for a second. What I mean by that is, if I choose Pepsi over Coke, okay, other people, and let's say you, James, who might choose Coke, can continue to choose Coke. I freely give of my money to Pepsi because I like Pepsi, let's say. But there's another massive portion of the population that likes Coca-Cola. The problem in a democracy, and we're seeing this right now, over 70 million votes for both candidates in the US, there's going to be 70 million pissed off people and 70 million happy people. And then it goes the other way around 4 years from now. Whereas capitalism doesn't do that. It doesn't deny you the other choice. It says you can go get Coke if you like Coke, because you'll surrender your money for that Coke. And so this is the closest thing we're going to get to fairness. Now, here's the problem with that. You can have better people working at Pepsi than at Coke, and they will be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, and rightfully so, of a greater market share. And so it seems unfair. But the reality is, I'm completely voluntary, you're completely voluntary in our purchase of Pepsi or Coke. That's why capitalism is the most democratic form of society that we have, and that's the closest we get to utopia. And it's a long way from utopia. There is no utopia, right? And so that's why I think people look at that and go, yeah, wouldn't that be nice if we didn't have men with guns? Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? The problem is we do. And so the answer to bad men with guns has to be good men with guns.
So you see that in a lot of cases when you look at the Texas church shooting, where the guy walked in and he was able to kill one patron before he was shot and killed by 3 other patrons who had guns, no one had a weapon. He was in a place of worship in a church, and he could have had free range, and he could have probably taken 10 to 15 people in by the time he'd have to reload, and people would fight him back. He could have shot 5, 6, 10 people. And by the time the police show up and secure the building and enter it, he could be in there 10 minutes. Right? Because that's what it takes. I mean, they say if you're in a live shooter situation, you got to prepare for 10, 15 minutes. You got to survive 10, 15 minutes, not 2, 3 minutes. SWAT doesn't show up in 2 minutes, right?
The one I'm really struggling with, though, still, James, is schools. Like, I don't think people talk about arming teachers. No, I don't think so. So what are we doing there? Because you're right, in the church incidents, yeah, absolutely. Thank goodness there are armed citizenry to stop that bad guy. And look, if anybody's watching this and there's comments coming in saying, well, we'll just take away all guns. Unfortunately, that just doesn't work. I mean,
so here's the thing about the idea of taking away guns, right? I love the places where they say gun-free zones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
It's only law-abiding citizens that will obey that rule.
Right. So you've got law-abiding citizens. So we're trying to punish 98% of the population for 2%.
Yeah.
Now, nowhere else would we do that. Nowhere else would you go against 98% of law-abiding citizens, because the 2% that don't abide. The 2% would be the exception, the change in the graph, the difference in your calculations, what stands out to you. The I don't want to say the left, okay? But I want to say some people who imagine this utopic world, they imagine it out of this realm of going, well, if we got rid of all weapons of war. Well, guess what? Before guns, people had knives and still killed each other. So did you have a knife-free zone? Before knives, they had bows and arrows. Did you do an arrow-free zone? Before bows and arrows, they had, what's it called? The spikes. I forgot, how the early man hunted.
There are weapons. There are weapons, right?
Humans have created weapons from the moment man was created. It's biblical. Cain and Abel used weapons. Cain and Abel, right? Brothers. People used weapons from the third story in the Bible. Right? So you can't look at this and go, well, we can change human nature. You cannot change human nature. The argument of defund the police is only meant to sell it to people who are secure and go, well, I don't really see cops, but those inner city people, those people that don't have it, that interact, well, those cops are really, really rude, right?
Yeah.
And cops are people, and police officers are people who have good days and bad days. They are in a high stress position. They deal, every single call they take, every single action they make is a high stress action. There's nothing more nerve-wracking for anyone than to see a flashing blue and red light behind them. Yeah. That's very nerve-wracking. Do you remember your first time getting pulled over?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Especially because the first time is when you're a kid too. Because we're moving away from a quick point that I'm still struggling with something here, and I want you to help me, my friend, because, coming from England and Canada, where the citizenry really don't have weapons, okay, you don't have as many, certainly on occasion there are, very seldom, mass shootings, and I don't get. Right.
So let me explain something to you. So
sport shooting.
So let's go through this whole school shooting things. I don't get school shootings. Okay. America has a gun culture. Like it or hate it, America's Second Amendment is your right to carry weapons. It is part of our DNA. It is part of our culture. Most people teach their kids responsibly how to use a weapon. I lived in Colorado when Columbine happened.
Did you?
We had a track meet at Columbine later that day. We never left our high school to go to Columbine because the shooting happened an hour before we were supposed to get on the school bus and drive to Littleton to go to the track meet at Columbine High School.
Right.
I knew kids at Columbine. I had friends at Columbine. Okay? That was the first major school shooting.
Yeah.
That was the school shooting that rocked me at the time as a high school kid to my core. Because it was not only a high school that I knew, I had friends that went to that school. It was close to home. And it resonated. Okay? And when people talk about what that school shooting did, it didn't take away a sense of security. It took away a sense of innocence. And that innocence was the psychological pressure, and this was before the era of internet, the psychological pressure of entertainment and of specific culture to both of the shooters. And I refuse to say mass shooters' names, so I'm not going to say their names, although I know it. I know that one of the shooters' mom gave a TED Talk about her son, and I encourage anyone to go watch it.
Really? Yeah.
It's a very, very fascinating TED Talk. I think it's one that's very effective. So when we talk about school shootings in America, we talk about happening too often. I don't know. I don't know what's too often, right? We have nothing to judge this by. In China, you have stabbings of kids in school all the time. No one says China has a knife problem or a knifing of kids in school, but I'll take you back to a decade ago, before China shut this stuff down, where these Chinese single lonely men were going up to daycares and going up to elementary schools and stabbing kids. I mean, knifing them throat to sternum. It was a major story. It was a pandemic. It happened all the time, and then it stopped. Now, I don't know if it stopped, or I don't know if the media just said no one cares anymore about this. And it's China, and China may censor this, right?
Yeah.
But this has happened in other parts. Let's not forget Norway, and the island in Norway where that kid drove out and killed, I think, what was it, 70 kids over in that island in Norway?
Yeah.
During a summer camp.
Yeah.
There's an inherence of humans to be violent, and that violent is translated into different age groups. And unfortunately, when you're in a school age group, you don't go shoot up a bar. You don't go shoot up a club. You shoot the school. You have people at the school that piss you off. Now, how do you tackle that? So there's been, I remember at my school, we always had a police officer, a school resource officer that was always in our school, right? My daughter's school has a school resource officer. It's a police officer within every police department. Colorado was the first state to do that after Columbine, where they had a school police officer assigned to the school 5 days a week. They worked the school hours. They dealt with all policing issues within the school.
That's right. That's probably a good solution.
And the beauty of a school resource officer was you had good interactions with the police.
Yeah, that's right. Community policing, kind of, in a certain way.
Well, I remember one time I was smoking a cigarette. I was 15 years old. Smoking a cigarette in the back of the school. I'm not allowed to smoke cigarettes. Police officer saw us, came up to us. We all put our cigarettes out. And she goes, listen, I'm not going to cite you guys. I'm not going to write you a ticket. But just so you know, and gave us a 10-minute talk about cigarettes, right? Yeah. Now you're in high school, you go, shut the F up, we don't know what you're talking about. But at the same time, we weren't afraid of the police anymore, right? We didn't fear her in terms of, she's going to shoot us or tase us or arrest us. Yeah. She became someone that when I had a problem later on, I went to and I asked for advice.
Yeah, you got a relationship. Right. I think what you said at the beginning there, you said, America is a gun culture. I think that if you look at history, most likely, now I'm speculating and I'm just thinking of this now, but you think settlers coming over in 1600, okay, well, that's around the time guns were invented, wasn't it? Around that time, roughly?
It was. Yeah.
Right. So this is actually quite interesting. So if you're going to go settle completely wild land where there are bears, and of course, this is a time pre-internet, pre-bloody books, really. I mean, that the mass distribution of books, certainly. And so folklore, stories. This was at a time, 1600s, people still thought werewolves were a thing, like scientists. I'm not talking about idiots, scientists, right? Thought werewolves were a thing during this era. And so you can imagine coming over here, you would want to be protected, armed to the hills. Plus you're settling land, plus it's lawless land. I mean, hey, look, for anyone outside America, you need to understand what the Wild West was. That was an actual thing, right? The Western movies are cool. I love Western culture. I love Western movies. I lived in the West. But the real Wild West, the Wyatt Earp kind of Wild West, was incredibly rough. Everybody was armed. You absolutely needed an amendment, the second one in this case, to make sure that the citizenry can take care of themselves. So I think that's where you've nailed it. I think the idea is that a country was birthed at the same time as the technology of a weapon, gunpowder in a barrel, right, pushing out a metal projectile. And And this is what it is now. Whereas these other countries, Europe, Canada, Canada not so much actually, because Canada was settled around the same time, but it was part of the British Empire that had already been established. So that's interesting. And the British Empire, of course, had all their redcoats, and their redcoats were the people with guns who went out and did all the security. So that's kind of interesting. Whereas the United States broke off from the redcoats, and so they had to have their own guns. Actually, this is becoming a better story the more I talk about it, or a better theory or understanding of it, right? So if you're established...
Well, it takes you to culture. What you're talking about right now is culture.
Right. Which, by the way, I love it. I'm embracing this culture. I think it's great. I'm taking up sport shooting. Right? I'm going to go down the range. I'm going to own a gun, go down to the range. I want to learn how to strip it. I want to learn how to clean it. I want to learn everything about it, take all the safety courses. I think it's going to be incredible. I think this is a lot of fun. To me, actually, this is an extension of another level of freedom, right? It's really cool, I think. So I think that's the issue. It's in the culture. And so now that it's in the culture, how does one deal with it? You can't just take, and then now we come back full circle to what you're talking about, gun-free zones. You cannot therefore ask people to not have a gun in a certain zone, because the only people who will do that are the good guys.
So let's talk about let me talk to you a little bit about culture. Let's talk about this for a second, this defund the police.
Okay.
Because there's a cultural idea here. And I'm about to strike a point, and it may go boom, or it may go, James, you're insane, and you've probably suffered too much PTSD in your life.
This is the town square, man. This is the place to do it.
So here's where this goes. We have a tendency to hate the people that win. We like winners, but we don't like winners for a long time, and then we start to root for the underdogs. So I'll explain. Thanksgiving, last week. Some people were like, happy Indigenous People Day. I'm like, no, assholes. It's Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgivings. Yes, there were Native Americans here. The settlers came. They had better weaponry. Those guys had bows and arrows because they had not developed. They were not. They were stuck in their ways for hundreds of years, for however long they were on this land. Right?
Technology wins wars. Always.
Technology wins wars always. These guys came with guns. Those guys were bows and arrows, right? So there were casualties on both sides, but then one side ended up winning because they not only brought guns, they brought cannons. They were better planned. They were better equipped. They knew how to fight this war, and they won. Done. End of discussion. You can like it, not like it. You can say it led to genocide, didn't lead to genocide. Every country has this story. I've been to 100 countries. That globe behind me, every spot that you see on that globe is a place I've been. Every country has a story of someone who came there who was not supposed to be there. Folks, South America, the reason they speak Spanish and Portuguese is because they were settled by the Spaniards and Portuguese. And guess what the Spaniards and Portuguese did? They killed the natives, right?
Brutally too,
yeah. So I don't see anyone going Argentina's Independence Day as going like Happy Indigenous People Day in Argentina. No, you don't say that, right? No one's looking outside of that. The idea of culture today is I gotta hate, I gotta dislike, I gotta root for the person who's weak. And the weak person here is the people who are abused by the police. Now, the police has a long way to go. There's no perfect system, but the police need more oversight. We need to get rid of police unions. I'm firmly for getting rid of unions. Like I just think unions as a whole need to go. Teachers unions, police union, fire department unions, all those unions need to go.
Unions are politicians. That's it. So it's just an extension of the state.
Unions are a problem. When people say defund the police, no, defund the police union. Outlaw the police union.
Right.
If you outlaw the police union, then cops will be held accountable for their actions. Cops are not held accountable to their actions today, or are seldomly held accountable to their actions today.
They'll be protected. Because
they are protected by the police union that exerts pressure on internal affairs, on the district attorney, on the judiciary to get things happening. So you have to kind of look at that and go, well, what does that really mean? It means we got to get rid of those units. Now, let's go back to culture for a minute. Here's where all of this comes together. People today want to find an underdog. People today want to root for something in America. Because guess what? America is freaking winning, man. We're winning. In the last 3 years, we are winning. And people are going to be like, oh my God, you sound like Trump, James. And well, yeah, maybe a little bit, but we are winning. We had the most robust, best economy ever. That's the greatest threat to anyone, right? We've had the lowest unemployment. Most businesses started until COVID came. Then COVID came and shuttered all of this down. And now we're seeing the doctorian, authoritarian governors that are trying to shut down. I mean, the CDC is now telling Americans don't travel for Christmas. Like, who are you? If I want to travel for Christmas, I'll travel for Christmas. If I want to have 30 people at my house on Christmas Eve, I'm going to have 30 people in my house for Christmas Eve. Apparently the NORAD Santa tractor is going to have Santa with a mask on. Like, what the effing F, folks? Calm down, all right? Here's the deal. We have allowed culture to seep into a point where winning and actually defeating a subject matter is bad, and it's looked at badly. And then this becomes part of an economy where people need to see oppression for their cause in order to continue to raise money. So let me explain something to you in kind of a way where people can comprehend it. What happened with record low unemployment in the Hispanic African American community in the last 3 years? What happened to the communities? Crime dropped. You know why crime dropped? Because people had jobs. Now, who suffered from that? Organizations and nonprofits that were working in those neighborhoods, because all of a sudden there's not as much crime, there's not as many needy people, they're raising money, right? But they're not raising the same amount of money, and they're not treating the same amount of people. When President Trump closed down the border to illegal immigration, and he did the deal with Honduras and Mexico and all the nations in Central America, Nicaragua and others, and Panama and so forth, a lot of charities were like, wait a minute. Now they started raising money, and they started going south of the border to deal with the migrants, because that was their business, right? That was entire people's livelihood. Organizations came up. Donors were supporting them, right? For whatever reason, political, human, you name it, whatever. And that's why ICE, if you got to remember, in 2016, ICE were bad people. Immigration Customs Enforcement. And then it switched from ICE to police a year ago. Right? Yeah. It was before defund ICE. Don't give money to ICE. Right? Keep ICE out of your cities. Don't let local police work with ICE. And then they saw that police was still working with ICE. And they were like, all right, now we need to defund the police, because then ICE... Listen, it's all a cycle, okay? And it's all culture. It's trying to fight a war. They're trying to win battles, and this battle of defunding the police doesn't work in America, period. No American wants this. It's like overwhelming. It's like 100% Republican, like 80% Democrat.
Yeah. And this is the trouble with the social media that we've spoken about quite a bit, right? Because if nobody wants it, why is it lasting? Why does that phrase just keep getting knocked around in all of the social media?
Because we live in a hashtag world. I'm sorry to cut you off. We live in a hashtag world. We live in a world where people want to put hashtag defund the police, hashtag my cause matters, hashtag this, hashtag that. And we search things through hashtags, right? We live in a very interesting time, Eddie. We live in a very interesting time because technology can really assist police. And let's spend the rest of the show really talking about solutions for defunding the police. Let's give people who are sane, who want to be able to argue against the people who are saying we need to defund the police, and we don't mean to get rid of cops, but reduce their budgets and apply it to community stuff and build better schools. Well, we don't need better schools. We need to hold schools accountable. That's what school choice is for, right? Why are people fighting school choice? School choice makes so much sense to everyone. Yeah. I want to send my kid to the best school no matter where I live. that
Right.
creates competition within the schools. Who doesn't want that? School teacher unions. They don't want that. No.
Right.
You know why? Because if you teach at a bad school, you can get more money from the government. I'm teaching in a bad area in a bad school,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the reason my kids don't test well is because, well, you know, we're in a bad area where there's a lot of poverty and kids have food insecurity, and so we get to that. So let's talk a little bit about solutions. I know you have some facts you want to share about a little bit about the police, so I'll let you kind of do that, and then we'll talk about solutions. Eddie.
Well, I was simply going to, I hope, impress people, right? To talk to them about some of the progress that has been made in policing specific to technology. So, in some of our large metropolitan areas in the United States now, and this is a bit Big Brother, so let's just set Big Brother aside for a moment. We can have a whole session on that. The CCTV cameras. Now, what's amazing about this technology is that now the sensors, the algorithms that run these cameras, if somebody, so think Boston Marathon bombers, if somebody drops a backpack in a street and obviously walks away from it, contains some kind of bomb. I think those guys were using a pressure cooker, homemade pressure cooker bombs. If the algorithm that is being used with the CCTV camera senses there's a backpack without a human for more than 30 seconds, it locates it, sends out a message to police officers in the closest area to say, hey, go check this out. Now, there's going to be a service level agreement. This stuff is not being built. It has been built, but we're still working out all the kinks on this. So the service level agreement is going to be whatever. I don't know. Let's say 60 seconds. So now within 60 seconds of identifying this backpack, we need to have somebody on it to have a look at it. So that's the idea here. Here's another one, although this is EMS services, defibrillators on rooftops of buildings, let's say in New York City, big areas where there's lots of traffic. If I'm walking down the street, somebody's having a heart attack, I'll dial 911. Ambulance is going to take 11 minutes to get there. This poor guy could die. Instead now, a defibrillator will take off from a drone on a rooftop near me, land right next to me, and if I'm trained and I know how to use it, I can help that person immediately. This is the technology. I mentioned a little bit before that now police officers can use their phones to triangulate where criminals are if they're pinned down under attack, so that they can look at the CCTV camera and see where those people are when they're pinned down behind something that's sheltering them from an onslaught of bullets. What else is going on? Right, here's another one, facial recognition. So the facial recognition, and I do wonder about Snapchat. This is kind of interesting because Snapchat, and I'm speculating here, I don't know this about Snapchat, so and we should do our little disclaimer at the end. Snapchat developed these amazing algorithms for facial recognition, right? And it's a free tool that kids use. Now, of course, they get advertising dollars from it, but I wonder if they are also leasing or selling, or if other people are benefiting from the algorithms that Snapchat has come up with, because facial recognition today is unbelievable. There's actually a deal with the French car manufacturer Peugeot. They're trying this right now, that if somebody gets in behind the wheel and they're drunk, they're inebriated, apparently the algorithm can tell and the car won't start. That's where we're going with this. So this is pretty incredible stuff. Now, with that facial recognition, police services are creating what they're calling a threat cloud, or just their own cloud of information, which they are then sharing that information with other police services around the United States. So if a person of interest happens to be in Chicago, right, and NYPD is looking for that person, the clouds are connected, and that person's profile goes up, and they just got picked up on a CCTV camera in Chicago now. So this is another massive advancement in police services. Now, tell me, does defunding the police help this or not? Right? We actually need more money for police services. And I love your idea about getting rid of the unions, because that's a lot of money. You know, military, to my knowledge, doesn't have unions.
Nope.
So we have
no union in the military.
Right. And these people are under duress. There's millions of them, right? So it's kind of interesting as to why we would even need this now.
Well, it's a waste of taxpayer money, right? So police unions are negotiating taxpayer money with elected officials.
Oh,
and so
it's
a waste of taxpayer money, because you could take that money and save it, but no one wants to go to the root cause of the problem. right? All the stuff you're talking about technologically is all great. But if we look at the root cause of the problem, we have to talk about the fact that, one, there's no national database for police officers. That's something that should be the FBI's responsibility.
Well, I was going to say, does the FBI? Surely the FBI has a national database. That was the whole point.
Not really. Not that's accessible by others. Hang on.
I just lost you on screen, by the way.
I know you did. Give me just a moment.
Really? Oh, yeah, that's true. So does the FBI share with municipal police services? I would have thought they would.
So the FBI.
Yeah, go on.
So for those you can't see me, I apologize. For whatever reason, I'm being kicked out of my own video screen here, but I'll be right back on here in just a moment.
Well, so actually, that is interesting about whether the FBI does or doesn't share. That was the point of the Department of Homeland Security, right? After the 9/11 Commission showed that CIA had a little bit of information about planes being flown into buildings. FBI had a little bit of information about something going down on September 11th. And I think the National Security Agency had some kind of bits of information.
So that's different, though. So that's different. Yeah. So today, if a police officer that works in NYPD, and let's say he gets fired for excessive force, and tomorrow he goes and he applies and he says, I'm going to move to Buffalo, New York, and I'm going to be a police officer in Buffalo, New York. They run a background check on him, obviously. But the union may strike that in his card, meaning when they call for a reference, they don't say what he was dismissed for. So the hiring police chief in Buffalo
that's what you
may
mean.
Not know.
Yeah. Right.
And there's no strike system, meaning bad cops that get fired every few years from the job that go from one department to the other are just bad cops that keep moving around. So they end up working in one city for a little while, then they go to a different city and a different city and a different city, and then 10 years later, they no longer work anywhere. So there needs to be a national registry for police officers, right? That's managed by either the FBI or the Department of Justice, preferably the Department of Justice, right? And not the FBI.
Now, so I was thinking a database of criminals, though. Is that
there's a database of criminals, but a police when we talk about improving police, we need to talk about, first of all, what do we mean by improving police? And so we need to lower the amount of bad police officers who make it in the police force. See, the criminal number isn't going to go down because crime just will always be a specific percentage of something. Right? Good economy, crime goes down, but you still have crime. But the type of crime may be different. Bad economy, crime goes up. And the types of crimes also go higher with it. Right? Because, robbery, murder, all those things go up when the economy's doing worse. When the economy's doing good, murder rates go down, robbery rates go down, all these different things. Now, you still have crime, but a lot of it could be, DUI, drunk driving, so forth. And statistics support that. Look at the FBI stats, compare them in off years, and you see that. But you got to get rid of the bad police officers. You got to make it hard for them. And unions, when they negotiate a police officer getting fired and the severance he gets, will typically always ensure that none of that's on his record.
Man. So here's a good question. How the hell are we going to get rid of the unions? How does that happen? Now, actually...
You outlaw unions. And you may have to do it on a statewide level. You may have to start state, right? You may have to have 10, 15 states, bring it up to the state legislature, get rid of police. There should be no public unions where they're negotiating with taxpayer money. Yeah. Right? And federally, we need to pass a law that creates a federal police officer database, meaning if you're a police officer in the U.S., you go through a federal database that could be monitored by the DOJ or the FBI, right? Preferably the DOJ, because you want a U.S. attorney. You want U.S. attorneys to investigate police officers. You don't want local DAs doing it.
Okay, now this is a great question for a foreigner coming in here. Talk to me about the difference between the attorneys and the district attorneys and
the U.S. attorneys. So
U.S. attorneys and
I think police officers. So a district attorney is typically one who works for the county. Okay. So they may have a personal relationship with the police officer. So, for example, I'm a police officer in the city of Atlanta. I arrest people and I prosecute them. I'm typically a witness for the prosecution, the district attorney's office. Now I'm accused of a crime. The people who I testified for have to prosecute me. Right? And that prosecution and that investigation and all that aspect is now being done by those people who at one point in period in time were my peers. Right? Having it done by the U.S. attorney, meaning the U.S. attorney for that jurisdiction would investigate it. Now, they could use the local district attorney's office as materials as part of their investigation. Today, the way it happens is, if, like with the George Floyd case, the U.S. attorney went in and looked at it only because the attorney general said, go look at it. Right? Otherwise, there was no aspect to it. Same thing with all these other cases. So then the U.S. attorney probes become political in nature. So there's additional pressure. If you make it default, there's no pressure. You reduce the idea. It's no longer politics or virtue signaling. It's there was a shooting here. Internal affair investigates. U.S. attorney assists with the investigation. U.S. attorney prosecutes the crime. It's a federal crime, right? And in that way, you increase. A cop will think 3-4 times before doing something. But at the same time, you'd have a more thorough investigation and more transparency for the citizens.
Damn, this is good. This is good reform. This is police reform, James. I like this. Talking about outlawing the unions. Now, the only way that's going to get done is if you get rid of the lobbying power of the union.
Yeah.
Right? Because who the hell is going to do that at a state level when they're on?
Again, you gotta have brave people that are willing to do it, and we're going to see bravery over the next 2 to 3 weeks, right? I mean, our country is in the midst of a situation where at one point or another, people are going to have to be brave to make the right decision here, or at least give the right view to people to be able to do this. So I say that. Now, you got to get rid of lobbying. It's a tall order, but if you get people to buy into it and there's enough public pressure, it'll get done. Because you got to remember one thing. The public controls the politicians. The lobbyists may finance them, but the public is the one that ends up remembering.
Yeah, the politicians want their votes, but the trouble is this kind of conversation, so the long form, these tweets, defund the police, the reason why they survive in a conversation like this will I won't say it won't survive, but it's defund the police. It's just a few words. It's just throw it out there. You have to have the long form discussion. So getting the people behind this is going to be a hell of a lot harder, right? And I just don't think I don't think sloganism is going to be a friend at all.
Well,
to what
if they did a hashtag that said "reform the police," you'd have something, right?
What would it mean? It would mean so many.
Well, you got to reform the police, right? So one of it has to do with training. So we talked about the bad apples, but the other part is police officers are overworked, undertrained.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So let's ensure that a cop does a training once a month, that they're able to shoot at a gun range once a month, that they go through de-escalation trainings once a month.
Jiu-jitsu, that's right. Mental health training.
And every 6 months, they have their assignments change. Right?
And I would even say every 6 months, they get maybe a month of training. So, I mean, really, it might sound extreme, but I'm a big advocate for that.
So the challenge with that is going to be you're going to have to hire more police officers to make up for the deficit in HR, right? And that's going to be a hard sell for a lot of people. I think that the way you do that is if you give people a day of training every 20 days of work, where they do a training day, and every 6 months they spend a week doing something else. So for 6 months, I'm on the beat, I'm working the streets, and then a week I go and I'm working something in, I do airport duty. I do desk duty. I do evidence room duty. I do some different duty that allows me to go back to something a little bit more refreshed with a little different point of view. Right.
Hating you.
Right. So you're able to a little bit overcome, I don't want to say prejudice, but you're able to overcome some of your challenges. There's aspects to that need to be looked at. And Eddie, there's more to it, right? There's a lot more to it. You can talk about this stuff from now until tomorrow.
Well, yeah, and this is what I mean by, police have had in the last 20 years especially to retool and skill themselves, and the learning curve has just been ridiculous. I mean, you're a CISO. We've had to learn as we go, this generation of people. And so it's mind-boggling that the expectation while we were building the plane as we fly, the internet and technology and the kind of the digital age, that we all groups would have been able to keep up with this. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine runs an organization called cybercrimesupportnetwork.org. I think that's the address. I'll look it up in a second when you're chatting, James. And she runs this outfit because there really isn't a place for people to go who have been the victims of cybercrime. I mean, it's very difficult, so identity theft, cyberbullying is a big one. Yes, of course, these things are reported to the police. Do you know how much cyberbullying is reported to the police? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's way too much. It's completely inundating for them. And so, you've got communities that have built up support networks like this because police obviously are having to get into this whole retooling phase. And so this is why I'm an advocate for a massive amount of time off or training, for these police services, so that they can be tooled all the time. I love your idea though, man. I mean, I think that's really cool. If they go every 6 months, you get a week doing a different type of duty, especially if you're a frontline on the beat cop with people spitting in your face every day. It'd be nice to come to an area where people like you and I hang out, where we love and cherish and appreciate the police and is it called the thin blue line? Is that what it's called?
So
and why is it thin?
Yeah, it's the thin blue line.
Why thin?
It's a good question.
Probably because there's not much between us and the bad guys. It's just a very thin blue line.
It is. It's a very thin blue line. I think there's an aspect to this that really does kind of take this into one space or another. The thin blue line is just that blue line on our flag that symbolizes the difference between criminals and good people.
Right.
There's a piece to that. I have a bunch of thin blue line flags and T-shirts and whatnot. I mean,
so it's an actual. I haven't actually seen it. So it's an actual flag. I'm actually going to bring up images.
Look it up. You can actually put it in your background.
No kidding. Look at that.
So while you do that, I will say this: 2 other ideas for reform beyond training, beyond creating a registry, is also getting rid of one of the police officers have a level of immunity, where if they do if for example they happen to break a law while they're doing their job, they have a level of immunity, right?
Really?
We should get rid of that. I don't think we need to handspring the police, meaning I don't think we need to create so many different rules and laws to where a cop has to think 3 times before doing his job. But I think what you end up doing is good cops don't break these rules, but bad cops often do. So you create a little bit of more stricter rules to make bad cops think twice before they think about doing something bad to someone they're interacting with. Right?
Yeah.
And the other part of it is, if you want to talk about police reform, right? We need to talk about the idea that cops we need to address community policing. And the idea of community policing is what I gave an example for with my high school police officer, right? Which is, let's teach people not to be afraid of police, right? And this especially goes into, minority neighborhoods. And it's really propagated well in the media and in Hollywood, where, a person is afraid to interact with police. Well, you shouldn't be afraid to interact with police, and you shouldn't think that by you screaming at a police officer that you can talk your way out of a situation you're in.
Right. Exactly.
I get pulled over. You get your day in court. That's how our system works. Go get your day in court. Don't fight the cops. Don't pull a gun on the cops. Yeah. Don't pull a knife on the cop. Don't pull a taser on a cop. Don't reach somewhere where a cop can't see.
Right.
If you're caught with drugs, bad luck. We're sorry.
Right.
Exactly. You should have thought about that before you got drugs.
You know, I think it's an ego thing, right? I mean, look, everybody's experienced a little bit of bullying. Everybody's experienced something unfair. Let's just get over that and swallow the red pill. I think what happens is we are outraged when that does happen from somebody in authority. You know, why do we find it even more abhorrent when a doctor, for example, commits crimes? Because we trust doctors, you know, they're there for us when we're weak. It's a deeper betrayal. It's like the betrayal of a parent on a child, right? So that's why I think people get kind of like really antsy when cops behave poorly. But yeah, if it happens to you, you just, unfortunately, you're just going to have to say, you know what, this is what the court system is for. And this is what the court system is for. I was just trying to Google, actually, you know, we're talking about bad apples, and that's a focus, because humanity, we gravitate toward negativity. We gravitate toward death. It's just part of the human condition. So I just thought, okay, well, how many cops are bad cops? Yeah, it's a tough one for me to Google on the fly, right? And in fact, this article from thecrimereport.org, and this is August 11th of this year, how many cops are bad apples, is basically saying, and it's Gregory Squires, a professor of Scientology and public policy and public administration at George Washington University, wrote this article. He's basically saying, look, we're unable to find that number. Now, I mean, I'll take a guess. It has to be less than 2%, I would think. I mean, I'm guessing here, but I wonder, because of the unions, is that the reason we can't figure that out? Because it's statistics. And I'll go back to the US military. US military records absolutely everything. I mean, data is vital. They've been doing it since the inception of the US military. So there's no reason why we wouldn't know. It actually is a little astounding if you think about it.
There is data of police violence, of police shooting. There's a lot of data, right?
Yeah.
I think, but there's no data. Or there's very little data. There's very little transparent data on bad police officers. Right.
There's a statistic I will bring up here, though. So this is what this Gregory Squires, this professor, says. We're spending $150 billion a year on 800,000 police officers to make about 10 million arrests. Most are misdemeanor crimes and traffic infractions, obviously, which comes to about 15,000 per arrest. Yeah, you know what? Because it's misdemeanors and traffic infractions, the 15,000 per arrest just seems a bit odd to pull out of the data there, because some people cost a hell of a lot more money to find and arrest than others. But at any rate, 150 billion, 800,000 police officers, 10 million arrests. Country 337 million people in America now, I think, right? So from 337 million, we're talking about 10 million arrests. That's actually pretty good.
Out of how many interactions?
I'm going to Google that right now. But that's pretty good. You think 10 million arrests
out of how many interactions? Hang on. Okay. How many interactions? Because that matters. It's not about people, right? Because out of 300 and let's say 50 million Americans, right? You've got 100 million that are, kids. You've got another 50 million that are elderly. So you take that down, and then all of a sudden it's 200 million adults. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Right. So it's still maybe
so there's around 370 million interactions a year.
But that's still a small percentage, even if it is. So 370. Okay. So Wall Street Journal, 375 million annual contacts that police officers have with civilians. Annual contacts.
375
million annual contacts.
And 10,000 arrests.
Yeah. So
10 million arrests.
and
So
10
that's
million.
an arrest. That's an arrest every 37 and a half contacts.
That's an arrest every 37 and a half. Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, right.
Now, the
That,
idea is not if you're arresting someone or not, right? Because if you even look at police shootings, 375 million interactions, there's 2,000 police shootings a year, right? That's nothing. That's not even 0.01 of interactions,
right.
right?
Right.
50% of that is white,
Right.
25% of that is African American, the other 25% is other ethnicities.
Right.
So,
Right.
so 1,000 out of the 2,000 people that are shot by police are white, meaning 50% of the people who interact with the cops who are shot at are white.
Right. And out,
25%
yeah.
are African American, so that's around 500. Of those, based on that Washington Post story, I think 9 were unjustified shootings of African Americans. 9.
That's right. Yeah.
9.
Yeah. I've read that. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
So
so,
that's
so
that's pretty damn good, man. That's a, you know what? That's
that's
really
not a
interesting.
defund the police. That's a let's reform the police and let's
Right.
reform society and culture. Cops are not your enemy. You don't snitch when you talk to the cops. Cops are there to defend your freedom, to enforce the law, and to
Right.
defend you at your moment of need. If
I
you cannot defend yourself.
I need to go through these numbers again. Okay, so 337 million annual contacts by police. And what did I say earlier? I
300,
said
you said 375 million contacts,
contacts.
10
right?
million arrests.
10 million arrests.
So that's
Right.
an arrest every 37 and a half contacts.
And a country, and I will do the statistics in a moment to strip out children from the 337
Well,
million.
look at it as contacts. Contacts is good enough. You don't need to do this as per population because I don't think that's relevant, right? There are people
what
who
I'm
go
trying
their
to say is-
entire lives without being pulled over. There are people
Yes.
who go their entire lives without interacting with the police, and then there are people who will interact with a police officer 6 times a day.
Right, but this is my actual point. Most of the citizenry is actually just beautiful and getting on with their day. For all the noise and rhetoric and what we hear in the media, and the fact that we are engaged in a dialogue. And look, if we're talking to people who love the defund the police thing, it ends up being a very spirited, I'll just be polite and say that, dialogue. And yet all that for the fact that the majority of the citizenry are beautiful and law abiding and there's no problem. And then of the 375 million interactions with the police each year, one person gets arrested. Is that what we're saying? Yes. No?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. One person gets arrested. That's amazing when you think about it. The amount of interactions a police officer has to have. So in other words, those police officers are either checking something that was, let's say, inaccurate. Oh, that guy looks like the guy we've been after. I'll pull him over. Oh, no, it's not you. See you later. Or the police officer comes in, interacts and says, hey, man, you got a broken taillight, or, hey, man, you shouldn't be doing whatever it is. But they're having a human judgment moment and they're going, you know what, we've sorted it out. But of those 37, one person is likely a criminal or a complete and utter idiot and is trying to fight the police.
Correct.
These are actually great numbers. This bodes well for humanity, my friend.
I think the problem we have again, and I think we'll summarize this. I think our problem with police is cultural. It's Hollywood, it's communities, and it's bad cops. All right. And I think we need to find a way to reduce the amount of bad cops on police forces because 99% of people who are police officers don't do it for the money. The money's crap. They don't do it for the thrill because, if you've ever met a family of a police officer and you speak to their spouse, their kids, they go, we worry about mom, we worry about dad.
Yeah.
Right. This year has been one of the most deadliest years for police officers shot on duty.
Yeah. And you talk about the police officers' families, the kids, it's horrific what these poor kids have to go through when you hear all this rhetoric about police officers being bad and police officers, in what the public judges as an unlawful shooting. It's like, since when does the public become experts in unlawful shootings?
The public isn't, and neither is the media. The public's not, and neither is the media. And the
And
people that
yeah,
so
they
you're
do
about
it.
to learn how to shoot a gun. You're about to learn how to shoot a gun.
Right.
So let me tell you something. The first thing the person who's going to teach you how to use your gun responsibly is going to tell you when you're shooting, shoot at center mass.
Okay.
What's center mass?
This bit.
Shoulder. Yep. Excellent. Police officers are taught to shoot the same way. If someone's a threat to you, shoot at center mass. One, because you're better at hitting your target when you've got a wider area of hitting your target. Not everyone is Jack Bauer and can shoot someone perfectly in the arm to get them to drop the weapon. Okay? Even in the Army, the best sniper can rarely hit a person and disable them with just one shot.
Yeah.
And the risk you take as a police officer when someone is charging you to hurt you or attack you, and let's say, I want to shoot him in the leg. Like Joe Biden said that.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, this is the same guy who tripped over his dogs and broke his leg.
You beat me to it. I was just about to say that.
Right? He said the cops should shoot him in the leg. No, they shouldn't shoot him in the leg. Because if there's kids and family and he misses that shot, then an innocent bystander is going to take that bullet, or that bullet is going to ricochet and hit someone or something and cause damage.
It's such a dumbass thing to say because, you know, as a decent citizen, if I were to go into the police service and this is my boss, let's say, saying shoot him in the, I would like, okay, I'll walk away from the job because you've just basically put me in.
But that's what's happening. More and more police officers are walking from the job, right?
Yeah.
We saw that in Los Angeles. We're seeing that in NYPD. Those cops are leaving. They don't have enough cops.
Yeah.
They don't. And it's going to take voting out Garcetti in LA. It's going to take voting out de Blasio, New York. And, you know, crime's going back up in New York. No one wants to go in New York. New York's a shithole again. It's dirty. It's disgusting. LA's the same thing. It's full of homeless people. Homeless people have more rights than people who pay their taxes. That's not right, man. You know, that's absolutely not right. It's a fake cultural issue. Our problem today is purely cultural.
Yeah, 100%. Like the culture of my community, we see the cops, we always wave. They'll often stop.
I see a cop. Yeah.
And we chat.
We see cops here all the time. We wave at them. We say hello. I know that we had an issue here with porch pirates in our neighborhood recently. And so we ended up...
Porch pirate, James?
Porch pirate are people who steal your Amazon packages. So they
sake.
follow the UPS and FedEx and Amazon trucks as they drive through your neighborhood.
Right.
And then Amazon will drop off a box and then they'll drive around and then they'll start essentially stealing those boxes from your porch.
Okay. Yeah.
So a few nights ago, you know, one of our police officers was parked. You know, I was making myself an espresso. I made a Americano and gave it to him because they're literally on my back street. That's where they sit and wait for him. Right.
Okay. Good for you, man. That's awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, listen, I appreciate our police force. I think we all should. I think we should all understand it's a difficult job. I think we all need to keep politics out of it and really just identify how we need to improve the police. And I think for most people you know, Kim Klacik did this during her campaign in Baltimore.
Yeah.
One of her ads where she was interviewing people, do you want to defund the police? And they're like, no, hell, we need more cops. Everyone said that unanimously, right? Yeah. But the people who want to defund the police are the spoiled, spoon-fed, middle class.
Right. And you know who they don't get hurt from defunding the police? The people who do get hurt.
They will. They will get hurt because when they go back to their suburb and all of a sudden the crime is up their suburb and there's no cop someone breaks into their house and it takes 10 minutes for the cops to show up, and by that time they've been, you know, smacked, tied, and all of their money and jewelry's been taken.
That'll eventually happen, but it's the underprivileged neighborhoods that will suffer first, you know. So that this
always will be. It always will be.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let me wrap with a story, my friend. So I've got a wonderful dog. She's an old girl now, maybe 12 years old. We've had her for a long time, and she's a rescue dog from the Rocky Mountains, and so she runs away a lot. And I don't live in a fenced, I've got an open plan yard, and so she'll just wander off. But she's this old girl, and the neighbors know her. She'll rummage through a few people's garbages. Anyway, one time she had disappeared, and so my wife and I are driving around the neighbor trying to look for her, and then I see these two police cars, and I said to my wife, just follow that guy. He's driving a little slow. And another police car was coming this way. So they were going down the street opposite side, and they stopped just to chat, winding down the windows. So I said to my wife, pull up next to these guys. And we went out the window. I'm like, hey, fellas, we're looking for a dog. So he winds down his back window and he goes, that one? And so Juno, my dog, sitting in the back of the police car, right, looking around. And this is the kind of relationship you need with cops. And we hung around there for maybe 5-10 minutes, just chatting. Juno was fine in the back of their car. She hopped into ours. Okay, yeah, I don't live in slums, right? I get it, right? This is a nice neighborhood where I live. Very different for a lot of people out there. I do understand that. But you can still be friendly to your police officer. So I would encourage that would be a place that everybody can start while we try to push a message out to get rid of those damn unions and start helping police officers, not defunding them. Yeah.
Indeed. Folks, Eddie, great story. Next time, make sure you put a picture of your dog on here so when you tell a dog story, we can see who your dog is.
Oh, she'll be a guest one day.
She will be. I want to say this as we wrap up. Police officers are a critical part of our community. They are our neighbors. They are our family. They're our friends. And like all things, there's good and bad, and there's good and bad police officers. That doesn't mean we need to look at one movement and do that. Anyone who argues defund the police, I challenge them. If they heard our entire rant today, Eddie and I will welcome anyone who's pro at defunding the police to come and debate us on this. Openly, with the ground rules of being mutual respect and no name calling and no saying, oh, you're a Trumper or you're a whatever. If you're able to have an intellectual dialogue on this, we welcome you on and we'll do an entire episode about it. Again, folks, that's it for today's episode. We're going to have another episode next week with another great topic. I think Eddie and I will brainstorm here and come up with a really cool topic for next week's episode. If you've got a suggestion, you can comment below on the video. Make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you turn on the notification bells. 6 p.m. every Wednesday, Eastern Standard Time. We'll be here. If we need to do this later, if the time doesn't work and you go, guys, I catch this, but I'd love to be able to watch it later, do it on a different day, let us know. We'll try to be as flexible as we can as long as we're not doing it at midnight. I think either of our wives would like that, but we'll try to be flexible. Right, Eddie?
Absolutely. There you go. And your challenge for the week, my friends, buy a cop some coffee. There you go.
Do that. So you're tuning into the Tech Town Square, myself and Eddie. It's a nice little thing I just came up with while we're doing the show. So
Beauty.
For
in
those,
blue light.
Yeah, we look really cool, right? It's an awesome little thing. So the Tech Town Square, I'm gonna do a screenshot of this while we're still got everyone here alive, so everyone smile. And that's it for us, folks. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching today's episode.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great rest of the week and stay safe.